Clear Cadence presents Visibility Rules on APS Forms. Hi, my name is Kevin Bedingfield. I'm the Managing Director at Clear Cadence, an Alfresco partner. Today I'm going to be talking about visibility rules within the Alfresco Process Services form tool. Now, the information I'm about to review is just a small part of a much bigger training course provided by Clear Cadence. Our live custom training program entitled Citizen Developer and Alfresco Process Services from Idea to Implementation will teach you and your company how to build fully functional, automated, and business-enhancing process applications, all with either no code or very little code. Contact Clear Cadence through our website for more information. In the meantime, back to today's lesson. Now, visibility rules allow forms to be more dynamic than just static fields on the screen. By using visibility rules, you can display fields that are pertinent to specific use cases or situations. For example, if one field holds a key value, it can cause another field to become visible or invisible if need be. Now, these rules can be applied to a single field or to a collection of fields, and more than one condition can be applied to a field. And all of this can be done without having to write a single line of code. Now, all of this will be covered in this short video, so let's take a look. All right, to start, I'm going to show you the finished version of the form. So what we'll do is we'll pretend we have an employee onboarding form, and we need to indicate if the employee is a full-time, part-time employee or contractor, what type of salary they have, their start date, and the department they will work in. Now, we'll add some other information that will be based primarily on the employee type, whether they're full-time, part-time, or contractor. So let's go in. We'll be using the out-of-the-box Alfresco Process Services, or APS, user interface, and we'll go to our visibility rule demo. So we'll start our process so that we can see our form. Now, you see we have a very basic employee information form where you would fill in the employee's first and last name. Obviously, you would add more fields to capture more information, but we're really just focusing on the visibility rules in this video. So that's all we have, a very limited amount of fields on here. So after entering the first and last name, we will select an employee type, and it's off of this field where we will be executing the majority of our rules. Now, we'll start with a full-time employee, and when I select that from our drop-down box, you can see the payment type radio controls displayed to indicate if this full-time employee is a salaried or an hourly employee, and we'll have a special section to indicate information specific for a full-time employee. Now, under this section, I can indicate the employee's start date and what department they'll be working in. Based on that department, what department we select will display a group control that is specific to showing a group of supervisors or people for that department. So you can see here we've selected human resources, and that caused the HR supervisor group control to appear. Now let's go back up here and we'll change the employee type to a contractor, and you can see that we've now hidden the payment type because their pay is completely different than a salary or an hourly based employee. And we have the contractor section for their information. For example, we have not only a start date, but also an end date since this is under a term contract. We also have a checkbox to indicate if the company needs to provide insurance. And if you check this, we will get yet another section displayed with a provider dropdown so we can indicate which insurance company was used. Now let's go and show you how we built this form by going into the Forms tool under the APS App Designer. So let's create a new process where we add our form. We'll just use the start event, we'll add a user task and an end event just to keep this simple. Now from the start event, we'll add a form reference and create a new form. We'll give it a name and use the standard default stencil. Okay, now in this form, we'll add two text boxes and call them first name and last name. Then we'll add a drop-down and call that employee type. Now under the options for this drop-down control, we'll add full-time, part-time, and contractor. Before I forget, let's put a header at the top of this and call this section employee information. And I'll move these controls under it. This just allows our form to look a little bit nicer. Next, we'll add our radio button control for the payment type with salaried and hourly as our options. Now, we only want to show this control if full-time or part-time employee types are selected in that drop-down box we just created. Now to do that, we'll go to the Visibility tab in this control and add a rule. Visibility rules are based on three factors: a dependency on a form field or a variable, a conditional operator, and finally a value. To set these values, you use the configuration tool to the right of the rule list. Now for the purposes of this demo, we'll use form fields in our conditional checks, but you can use other process variables that you declare within your process map. Now since we want to show this control based on the value of the employee type field, we'll select that field from the drop-down list. Now you'll note that when you want to use a drop-down control for your evaluation, you'll see two values for the drop-down control, an ID and a label. This reflects the options set in the drop-down list, the internal ID for the option, and the label that is displayed in the drop-down for that option. You can use either in your rule, but we'll just be using the ID in our example. Next, we'll indicate the operator for the condition, or if you're following the overall conditional syntax, it's depends on employee type ID if it's, and then we'll select equal in the drop-down, then select value because we're going to type in the value we are expecting. Now remember that this value needs to match exactly the ID in the drop-down option. It is case sensitive and obviously must be spelled the same. Now unfortunately, the interface does not provide the values for the options in a drop-down list to allow you to select from it. So make sure you make note of the IDs and the labels for your drop-down controls before setting your visibility rules, or you'll be doing a lot of back and forth between the controls, i.e. closing the properties of one control to open the properties of another control, checking the values, then closing the properties on that control and going back to the other control. Writing them down ahead of time will just save you a lot of time and frustration. So we're going to add full-time for the value here. Now, if we were only concerned with full-time employees having this control displayed, we would stop here. But since this control should also display when part-time is selected, we go to the next condition operator and select or from the drop-down, meaning we want the control to display if employee ID equals full-time or if employee type ID equals part-time. Now after selecting or, you will then add a new row in the rule list conditioning. You do that by clicking the plus button underneath the rule list. Now in theory, if you had a dozen different options, you would add as many rows connected with ors so that each rule could be evaluated. Now that we have those rules in place, let's add a few more sections to this form. We'll add a section for full-time employees, part-time employees, and contractors. Each section will be in its own header, and we'll control the visibility of these sections using our visibility rules. Now with our headers in place, we'll go to the full-time employees header and select the edit icon to get to our properties. We'll move to the visibility tab and add a rule. The rule will be very simple. If employee type ID equals full-time, display this header. We'll add the same basic rule for part-time and the contractor headers. In the full-time employee header section, we'll add a field for the start date, which will be a date control, department, which will be a drop-down field, and then 5 people controls for HR supervisors, new business supervisors, accounting supervisors, IT supervisors, and customer service supervisors. We'll add similar fields to the part-time employee section, but with just 2 people controls for the customer service supervisor and the accounting supervisor. Now for the contractor section, we'll add a start date and an end date, plus a checkbox for if the company has to provide insurance for the contractor. Going back to the full-time section, you'll see in the HR supervisor's people control that we've already set up the visibility rule to show this control if the value in department equals HR. Now, if you look at the options that we set in the department dropdown, you'll see we use shorter IDs for these values, which can make the overall configuration of these visibility rules just a little bit faster and a little bit easier to remember in case you didn't write them down earlier. For the part-time section, we'll have a department drop-down with only 2 departments because these are the only 2 departments that allow part-time employees, and thus will display just a customer service supervisor and an accounting supervisor control, and they will be visible based on what is selected in the same way that we've done with the other rules. In the contractor segment, we don't have departments to select since only the IT department uses contractors, so we'll tie the insurance information segment on if the checkbox for the insurance is checked or not. Now, instead of me showing you how to do those, why not take the time now to try it out for yourself? I've given you all the instruction on completing this task to set up your own visibility rule base form, so now is a good time to get started. And for more information and further instruction on how to utilize Alfresco Process Services without writing any or very little code, please contact Clear Cadence to enroll in our live training classes for citizen developers. We cover not only the visibility rules, but everything you need to know on how to build a functioning and powerful business process application, from understanding the APS tools in general to publishing and testing a full-blown application. Please visit our website or contact me directly at kevin.bedingfield@clearcadence.com. Thank you and have a great day.